In this masterclass, we are going to cover Zoho automation. That way you can work while you sleep. Now, I believe people use CRMs when CRMs work logically and actually automate their work. So my strategy in this video is to logically lay out the necessary stages of automating your business. First, I'm going to do a demonstration of an automated Zoho CRM process. That way you can understand the power of Zoho's automations. Second, I'm going to cover how to properly analyze a process to discover automation opportunities. That way you don't cement bad practices into your business. Then we'll dive into prioritization, which is arguably the most important aspect of automation, pre-work, solution design, and actually building the automations. Now, Zoho is tough to learn. So like and subscribe to the channel so you can become and stay a Zoho Power user. If you need help with Zoho, book a free consultation using the link below so you can get help from an authorized Zoho consultant. And with that, let's get into it. What I'm going to show you now is a highly automated process with Zoho. And when we go into this highly automated process, which is sitting on the marketing and sales front of the business, you may be thinking to yourself, well, Drew, this doesn't really apply to me. That's completely fine. The principle will apply to everything you do in business, all the activities, and the best way to automate them. The idea of this section of the video is actually to give you inspiration for things that you can do with your organization. You can see what other organizations have been doing and what I do with my organization so that you understand that most processes can be highly automated with Zoho. So that's the idea that I want to get across here. Let's jump into the process. Okay, so this process, like I said, it's in the marketing sales front of the business, or in other words, it's attracting people into the organization. So if someone goes onto my website, that's really the first part of attracting them to book a call with me, a free consultation so that we can get started, okay? So let's say someone was interested in ZBlitz. They'd go here, need Zoho help, and they'd fill out this form. Okay, this is the first part of automation. So if someone fills out this form on the site, I have various forms on my site. This is just one of the forms that's highly automated. Okay, people would fill out the information, they'd go to next until they submit the form. And then when they submit the form, my Zoho flow would kick off. So you can see I've got a bunch of different Zoho flows. Here's the contact us form. Let's go to the builder. And you can see it's a really simple automation. From the form, entry submitted, create or update a lead with all the various information that's coming along with the form submitted. So you can see here, if we give this a second to load, you can see that I've mapped all of the various values from this form over to different values inside of the CRM. So this would then become the lead inside of Zoho CRM. And so you can see all the information, all the different questions that are asked on the lead form also exist here on the lead. Now, this is where things get really interesting. Not only was this lead automatically created, it was automatically created in the right place in my process. So you can see, like I said at the beginning of this video, I believe people use CRMs when they are logically built and when they automate the things that you could do for yourself, but can be automated. Just makes your life better. So you can see here, this is my process from left to right. It's laid out logically. And then automatically, this has been created for MQL sales ready, or in other words, it's ready to go for me to act on. You'll notice that in the tracking section, there's some additional information here that we're capturing, like lead source, campaign, medium, refer, URL, term, content, IP address. Okay, how am I getting this information? Someone's not filling out this information when they go into the form. Well, automatically, if someone has, if we go to Drew Brockbank, you can see these URLs here have UTM parameters. Now, I've already linked those. I've added these to various links that I have on YouTube and other call to actions. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, I don't really want to do that. You don't have to. I also have a software called Attributor.io. I'll link to it in the description below this video. But the nice thing about Attributor is you don't have to automatically add all those UTM parameters, or you don't have to manually add all those UTM parameters to the ends of all of your call to action links. Attributor.io will actually analyze where they came from and will populate those for you. So it's actually a really useful thing, by the way. You want it to automatically apply because you will most likely forget to add UTM parameters to every single call to action within all your marketing efforts if you are inclined to do marketing, if that is something top of mind. Also, if someone comes to your site organically, you can't add UTM parameters to an organic link, right? When someone searches your website on Google and clicks on your website, they're not going to have the UTM parameters there. You won't be able to add those there. And that would look really weird even if you did. So you want all that information to be tracked for you, all the UTM parameters to be populated. And I'll show you why in just a second, but it's extremely important. Next thing that I do here that's interesting. So in Zoho Flow is like Zapier if you're not familiar, and you can add robust automations. These aren't even really the robust ones. These are just some that I wanted to show you, but you can get way more crazy with these. This is more of an intro. Okay, so when a new lead is created in my system, I validate the email using Zero Bounce. That's another software that's a third-party software in relation to Zoho. But what's really useful is I can then update all the information that comes back from Zero Bounce. And you can see inside of the lead here, I can get an understanding of the domain age, the business age in years, and then I'll get email validation. Now for this demo, that's not showing, but the nice thing is I can see immediately, hey, was this a valid email? Is this an invalid email? Should I be emailing this email? And then I actually get how many days the domain has existed. So with the @gmail.com, it's not going to be super useful, right? But normally it would be their domain, their custom domain.com. And so I'd get email validation. And then this is interesting. You can take the number of days that that domain has been active. You can divide it by 365 and see how many years. You can use as an indicator for how many years they've been in business to see how well established they are if you're doing sales. So again, that's happening automatically. So far, we've done nothing manually inside of this process. We've gotten all this information. The next thing that Zero Bounce does that's really interesting is after validating the email, we actually get a ton of information, including location information. So you can see this is all the info that we're getting from Zero Bounce. We're getting the location information. How are we getting this based on an email? Well, we're not getting it based on the email. Actually, we're getting it based on the IP address. So from the IP address, Zero Bounce is grabbing all this information and populating this section as well and saying, where are they at in the world? So you can see the power of all of this automation. As this lead has come in, we now have so much information on what they're interested in, what brought them into the business, where they're at in the world, and possibly how old their business is or how well established. We get an indicator of how well established their business is without doing a single thing. You can call that data enrichment. I call it automation. I call it not having to do it yourself and working while you sleep. So you don't have to gather that information over time. You know the term or the phrase you probably heard before, prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. If you don't have a ton of information, you can't do a deep diagnosis and get to the root problem. So having all this information before you even get on a first call is super powerful. I'm going to take it a step further. This can get way creepier. But now, since we have the IP address, I can link it with Sales IQ visitor data. I can see exactly what pages they have visited on my site. And then I can see how much time has been spent as well. I'm going to open this up. I'm going to show you kind of the back end. This is a script that I am using. And you can, if you want to copy this too, you can. This is a script that I'm using to automatically pull information from Zoho Sales IQ into Zoho CRM as a related list. So all of these automations fire and allow me to best understand what's going on with this lead, what's their situation so that I can give an accurate diagnosis as to what's going on. Okay, so one step here that I do manually is I choose to do this on purpose. Now I could automate pretty much all of this, but when people reach out to me or book a free consultation, I actually like to approve them. I don't like to engage with everybody. And I only want to serve those I'm best suited to serve. So what I do on the sales front is, and sometimes, I mean, it's not all just butterflies and rainbows. Sometimes the reason that I don't work with someone is they just don't have the budget. But a lot of times they're just trying to implement an app that I don't want to implement. It's like a very niche application and they're not trying to do like a full scale implementation of Zoho. Actually, if people just want to do like Zoho CRM or Zoho Analytics, one of the core applications, just implement one, that's totally fine. But I just want to make sure it's a situation that I'm best suited to serve. So once someone enters my CRM, I actually will manually drag them over to Working Sales Engaged. And that is my way of validating this information. So I could automatically have this record jump into Working Sales Engaged which would trigger my cadence. And my cadence is automatic. And this is my follow-up. Hey, you submitted the form. We're going to approve this record. Here's all this different, I actually send them a bunch of free resources. And then after a couple of hours, I give myself a couple of hours to actually approve. I let them know how many clients we actually have that are active and how many slots we have left. So they understand, hey, we may not be able to take you on right now, or we might be able to. So all my follow-ups are embedded into the system. That way I don't have to recreate the wheel over and over again. That's the power of these automations, is you can put all of your critical thinking into one time and space, create the process, and then automate it so that you don't have to recreate that process over and over again. That's what makes business draining and what leaves you without leverage. What gives you a ton of leverage is technology, putting your process into the system and then just working the system while the system works your business. That's what makes these things really powerful. And it makes your business exciting to use because now, or it makes Zoho exciting to use because now it's a tool that actually helps you. It's not something that you're currently constantly working against. So that's what I like about this. We're going to take it a step further. Automatically from Zoho CRM, I mean, this is transactional sales communication. You have Zoho campaigns, which is where I do my newsletter and then I nurture different leads. And I automatically have an integration set up that will send Zoho CRM leads over to campaigns. And from here, I can schedule my newsletter and say, hey, this is what's new in Zoho over the last week. These are all the different updates that have been made. And then if you want to watch a video, I go over it in depth. So it gives all that information out as well. We're going to take it even a step further with automation. I'm automatically tracking what everyone is doing on my website. This is super creepy. I can actually not only see this in a heat map view, you can see it's showing me how many people have clicked where, how many of the visitors are engaged, how many visitors, it's just for a month duration, but you can see, you get the idea here. It's going to show me how much people are interacting with my site and where they're interacting with the site so that I can make a judgment call and say, hey, Zblitz, maybe I should expand this. Or, hey, no one's clicking on book a free consultation. Maybe I need to change the color. And that's what you'd refer to as conversion rate optimization. But the point I'm trying to get across isn't necessarily what Zoho Page Sense, that's the application you're seeing now, you were just seeing. It's really to get across the idea that you can automate these things, that so many of these things can be automated so you don't have to do them manually. You can even get ChatGPT, AI involved to do some custom generative text, AI generative text to make this even more advanced. But for now, I just want to get the idea across that you can automate these processes. So last thing I'm going to show you is the visibility aspect of Zoho automation. So I also believe that systems are used by the administrative, by the people in your organization that are administering Zoho. The leadership in your organization, the management in your organization is very interested in seeing how well the business is performing from left to right logically. So not only do I believe you should lay out the system logically for users, I also believe you should have a dashboard, an executive dashboard, which will allow you to see how the business is doing so that you can work on the business. You're not always just working in the business. Because if you are a leader, if you're a manager, your role in the organization is to implement strategy and to improve the organization. And in order to do that, how could you do that without being able to see the organization? You don't want to implement things in your organization just because you feel a certain way about something. You want to make sure you have some kind of data to back up your case for why you're going to implement some kind of strategy. And then you can focus your efforts in the right place in the organization based on the current constraints of the organization. Okay, so that's the last thing here. This is happening automatically every 3 hours. I wish it was in real time. Zoho Analytics has a minimum data sync at the time of this recording the video for 3 hours to bring data over into Zoho Analytics. So this is CRM data. This is coming over from this. So for example, Drew, Kudo Software, YouTube will populate one in MQL sales ready for YouTube right here. That will be added. And then it will backtrack. It will add the leads, lead statuses going back. That's how you get this nice slope of the business and you can see the current constraints. Okay, so you can see how much goes into automation. The lead, once the form is submitted, and all of those things that I went over, we only did one thing in this process manually, which I could do. I could make that automated, but I'm choosing not to because I don't even believe everything should be automated. There's some things that are better done manually and that don't need to be automated. For example, my big concern is when a lead comes into the business, I think one of my competitors is going to try to submit a form. And I know this is a fact because my competitors have booked free consultations with me and try to get information out of me, which is ridiculous. It's such a waste of time. It's really frustrating. I know they want to steal my discovery process, my assessments. So what I do is I don't allow people to get a hold of my assessment unless I manually go through their information. I check their LinkedIn, I check a bunch of information so I know they're not one of my competitors. So I didn't send them automatically, right, the assessment, and then I get burned because then everyone has my assessment and I don't even know about it. I know this is happening because, again, people have booked a free consultation. Only the paranoid survive. So with that, this is a process that's been highly automated. It's the marketing and sales front. This can also happen in service. This can also happen in finance. Different areas of the business have so many opportunities for automation. You don't want to be doing these things manually. You want to lock everyone, yourself included, the rest of your team, into a system that forces them to be extremely productive, that's logically laid out, and that has automations in there for them. So that is the demonstration of a highly automated process inside of Zoho CRM. Okay, so all those automations I just showed you in the demonstration section are great, but how does this apply to you? How can you go about automating your business, your activities, so that you can work while you sleep? You don't have to recreate the wheel every time something happens in your organization. Well, that's where we get to the strategy and the analysis of your processes. And there is a coherent structure for doing this that makes sense and works over and over again. I've done this for over 112 organizations when implementing Zoho over 112 times. So you can know that the system works. The strategy works because it's battle tested. This isn't something that I'm making up a theory that I think is interesting and cool that's going to sound good online. This is what I've actually done. I've been doing Zoho development and consulting for over 4 years. This is a strategy that works for every single organization. And this is the strategy that will lead you to not only automating processes in your business, but your entire business if you commit to it. Systems aren't bought, they're built, especially automated systems. You can't buy an automated system. You have to build it. The capability is there, but you have to actually implement it. So with that, here is the strategy. This is a part of the analysis section of the video, but a prelude to all of this is the strategy. Okay, so the fundamental belief behind the strategy is from Michael E. Gerber: organize around business functions, not people. Not people. Interesting. Build systems within each business function. Business function, you can see right here. Business functions are the activities carried out by an organization. Okay, so the activities carried out by the organization. Build systems around the activities, the processes. Let systems run the business and people run the systems. Okay, systems are going to take care of the bulk of the mundane work, and people are just going to operate those systems, so they're highly leveraged. People come and go, but the system remains constant. It's going to ring true for a lot of you, and for a lot of you that should resonate. Okay, so here's the overarching strategy before we get to the analysis section. So the overarching strategy here, I'm going to zoom in, and the reason why this is important is you need to understand where detailed development or automation, what we're going to go over, what this video is about, how this fits into the overall Zoho implementation strategy. How does this fit into the big picture strategy? Well, if you look at this, I have it documented again from left to right so that you can see how these systems work. So the first thing is on the implementation side, from left to right, as if you're reading a book, these are the different things that should occur for a first version of Zoho. So if you're in the situation where you're evaluating Zoho, you don't know if you want to use it, and you're using this video to see what can Zoho do for me, that's great. You are in the implementation bucket. If you've already implemented Zoho and you know you can improve it, you're in the improvement bucket, which we're going to talk about too. Here's the nice thing too. If you have implemented Zoho poorly and you know you did, you can actually look at the strategy and you can still start from the top and you can successfully work the strategy for your business because I made some of these optional depending on your situation. Okay, so let's get into it. Demonstration. That's why I started this video with the demonstration. You need to give people an idea of what's been done and what a software should be doing before you build it. Okay, and that's where a lot of Zoho experts fail, is they don't know how Zoho should be used. That's the thing. A lot of Zoho experts or just people in the technical who are technical, they fail to have strategy. They're looking for direction. So they're very directive. If you tell them exactly what you need, they can go automate it. But if you need someone to tell you what you need, which is why you consult an expert to begin with, is to get advice, then you need them to present you a strategy, and you need them to demonstrate what software is capable of doing and what it should be doing for your organization so that you can implement accordingly and you have the end in mind. So that's the purpose of demonstration, is to get inspiration. Okay, that's why I started the video that way. This video with a demonstration. Documentation. Before you go about heavily developing any system, you should document it first. I'm not going to go too far down the rabbit hole here because a lot of my videos cover documentation in depth. But the gist of it is, you can see here, I have a journey document. It lays out my process from left to right. Let me just tell you this. It is far easier to do this document. You may be thinking, that's overkill. I just want to get in the system. Don't do that. If you don't document it first, get a shared understanding with key stakeholders. Even if you're just a solopreneur, it is worth the exercise. Lay out your process from left to right. It's actually way harder than you think it'd be. And I'll just tell you this, if you can't build a document from left to right of your processes, you for sure can't build Zoho. You will not be able to achieve that. So make sure that you get it in a document first, lay it out from left to right. Don't feel like you have to do it all. Just do the 20% of activities that support 80% of the revenue coming into your business. You're never going to have 100% of it documented. So just focus on the 20% of your processes that support 80% of the revenue coming into your business. And then you will be satisfied with documentation. Okay, let's go back to the strategy here. That's documentation. And you got customization. I showed you earlier in my system, if you go over to the leads module, like I was showing you earlier, you would see that my process that I documented is also how the system is customized from left to right. Now, that is very important to do because people locked into a system that's not logically built will not use it. If you have data in another system and you're coming over to Zoho, you need to migrate it. Again, you should do it in this order. There's a reason that it's in this order. This is battle tested. This has been done over and over and over again. I've shifted this order 1,000 times. And then over the last, 50 or so implementations, it's stayed the same. You've got migration. It's optional. If you don't have data, you don't have to migrate. Integration. This is optional. However, I highly suggest that you integrate all the core applications of Zoho initially so that when you do the migration, when you have those apps integrated correctly, as you change information inside of Zoho, it will reflect in all of the other applications as well. Got team training. This is optional. There's a lot of free training available, but I strongly encourage that your team is trained to use the software that you acquire. It just makes so much sense to know what you're doing in a tool before you jump into it. User acceptance testing. This is optional, but if you have a larger organization and you're moving from another system, you can actually do user acceptance testing before you jump into the system. Delta migration. The only thing arguably that I'd switch here is actually integration with migration. The reason being, having all of your applications integrated before you migrate over would be helpful. But really the reason you do this migration piece is just to see, this isn't a full migration, you would do a small migration, just to see the data in relation to your processes, being the customization documentation piece. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole. I could talk about that forever. But yeah, that's the only things I would arguably switch at any point in time. Delta migration, this is the sample migration. This would be your Delta migration. This is all the data that's from a previous system. Again, that's optional. It's only applicable if you're bringing over data. To wrap this up, executive dashboard. I showed you in the demonstration section of this video that there is a proper way of not just customizing, documenting and then customizing your system, reporting on that process from left to right. You use an executive dashboard to work on the business. You should have that as a version 1. Really, when you see implementation, this should be baseline version of Zoho, okay? High level development. How do you get everything set up and ready to go? You'll notice that we have not talked about automation yet. That's because this should be done first before you do detailed development, detailed level development, right? This is automation. This is the heavy integration. This is filling up the gaps. This is an outline for your picture, and this is coloring it all in, okay? This is waterfall. If you don't know, it's just a style of project management. It's more strict, and then agile is more flexible. So It's an oversimplification, but it'll get the point across. For now, once you have completed all of these things, whether you go for the optional things or not, you're ready for detailed level development. Okay, if you have these things set, you are good to go here. You don't have to follow this strictly, but you should. There's a lot of logic behind it. And we're going to go over the different principles that make up detailed level development, but this is where you fit in. Okay, this video is all about detailed level development. Okay, now that we have the shell of our tech stack, our Zoho One implementation, now that we have the shell completed, let's fill it in. Let's make this a highly effective tool. Let's automate everything that we can. Let's do everything we can to leverage Zoho. The reason that we do it this way too is detailed development is significantly more time consuming. So we want to make sure that we have this high level development, the 80-20 rule, the 20% that we can do in Zoho to get the 80% of its usefulness done off the bat. Then we can get into the nitty gritty because you can get lost here very, very quickly. So it's important that you have this section done first. Okay, let's start with the analysis part. This will go into detailed level development. We'll talk about urgent items, upstream, downstream, preferable, problem, principle, and rolling wave. We'll talk about that. Okay, so step one, and if I forget it, you can put in the comments, hey, make a video about this, and I can consider doing that for you. Okay, so step one, analysis or analyze. Why is this important? Well, without a business function laid out, teams can't get a shared understanding of the process that's being automated. Here, I'm going to put the cursor thing down here. Okay. Why is this important? Without a business function laid out, teams can't get a shared understanding of the process that's being automated. Don't build automation with a moving target. Define the process you are looking to automate. It may seem like extra work, but it's necessary when automating an entire business function as opposed to an easy one-off automation. Or in other words, you're just doing a one-off, easy automation. You don't need to do any of the things I'm showing you, but if you want a fully sophisticated, automated, advanced system, you have to do these things. You have to do these things in one form or another. There's no skipping steps here. If you don't do these things, it's going to be a huge mess. You're going to make Zoho a huge mess that you don't want to be inside of, and no one in your team wants to be inside of, and you guys are going to complain. You're going to complain about it. And then if you don't do these things, you'll move to another system, and then you'll do the exact same thing. You'll break it, and then you'll realize, why can't we buy a system that's advanced and sophisticated and automated? Because you can't buy it. You have to build it. You have to build it. And that goes into a whole other argument of why get like Zoho over HubSpot, Salesforce, all the other options. We're not going to go into that, but that's the idea here, is you need to have your business function logically laid out. So that brings us to the question, well, when do we whip out the flow chart? Well, that's not the best way to document a business function. It really isn't. My problem with business flowcharts, and people think they look really cool, and people are like, I'm visually minded. Doesn't matter. If I was hearing that from a client, it would just go in one ear, right out the other, and I'd be waiting until they stop, and I'd say, that's great. I've done this over 100 times. I know exactly how we should document these things now that we're getting into detailed level development. Flowcharts are helpful. Actually, later down the road, they're a helpful secondary form of documentation, but the primary form of documentation needs to be laid out as followed. That's when we get into this section. So first, choose the business function. So for example, my free consultation form submission process, okay? This is the business function we're focused on. Business function actors. Okay, an actor is anything that interacts with or within the system. This could be a human or a software program. So for example, for me, in my free consultation form submission process, as a simple example, it would be me, Zoho, attributor, and prospect. Okay, so business function steps. This is the gold. I can't tell you how many different forms of documentation I have tried with my clients and trying to understand their processes. This is the best way to do it. It is hard to create this, but it is worth it. So the first thing is that you would put the actor, what they are doing, and then the activity. Okay, so prospect visits the website, drewbrockbank.com. Zoho Sales IQ will capture, and I like to use the word will when I can, especially when the actors in the process are people, because it commits them to some sort of action, and then my clients will hesitate or be like, oh, we're not going to do that. And then I can know what's reasonable in a process to do if there's human interaction. With Zoho, Zoho's going to do what you tell it to do, as long as you know how to tell it what to do, even if it requires code. But for people, I like to put will because it gives a strong sense of commitment and responsibility, which people will shy away from, or they'll just flat out say, I'm not going to do that. And then we can adjust the process accordingly. Okay, so Zoho Sales IQ will capture visitor tracking data. So PageSense will capture visitor interaction data. Attributor.io will store UTM data in a cookie. One other thing for Attributor.io, go ahead and use my affiliate link in the description below if you want to support the channel, which you should, because it takes a lot of time to make these videos. So if you could, that'd be great if you're interested in it. Attributor.io will actually store UTM data in a cookie so that the UTM information isn't forgotten. Or in other words, when you use UTM parameters, if someone lands on your website, great. If they go to one other page on your website, you lose all the tracking so that the form can't capture it. So you use attributor.io so that the website doesn't forget the UTM parameters. It will always remember it. And it will remember for a long time. I think it's up to a year. So attributor.io solves that problem really well. Prospect will submit a form on the Brockbank Consulting website. Zoho Forms will push the submission data to Zoho CRM as a lead. This might be so painful for you. Like, I already know this process like the back of my hand. No, you don't. You don't understand this level of detail. You need to put this level of detail on paper. So many times business owners and leaders and managers or even users, they assume so much about the process. You have to detail it. You have to put it in this level of detail in this format, or you will not be able to strategically automate your business. Okay. And if that's not true, I'd love to see an alternative because I would use it if it was better. I really would. But this is the best that I found, and I am crazy about this stuff, finding what's the best process. Okay, Zoho Forms will push the submission data to Zoho CRM as a lead. I could even put like Zoho Flow will push the submission data from Zoho Forms to Zoho CRM as a lead. You may be thinking to yourself, well, what level of detail is necessary? Well, enough so that once you take this and you'll see later in the process what level of detail is necessary. But for now, the level of detail that you need is what you're going to need when you actually start a task or send it over to somebody. That's what's helpful. Okay. So last thing here, Zoho CRM will get data enrichment information from Apollo.io. This is something we're going to do later. It's actually not the process that I have now, but I'm going to show it to you and update the lead record with enriched data. Keep in mind, the 80-20 rule of business functions, like I mentioned earlier, do you have to document every when-if statement? Because that's the advantage of having a flowchart is you can say, well, then this splits lanes and on this condition, this happens, on this condition, this happens. Cool. That's usually not useful for detailed development initially because it gets so distracting and then you have 50 different rabbit holes you want to go down. Focus on the 80-20 rule. Just document 20% of your processes. That's going to give you 80% of the results, especially when you're in marketing, sales, and support. What is the 20% of your processes that's going to support 80% of your revenue? Because that's not half the battle. That's way more than half the battle if you can do that. And it's for 20% of the work. That's the best bang for your buck. Follow the 80-20 rule when it comes to documentation. That is how you can best document these steps in your process. High-level development is getting stages of your process. Stages are different than steps. Stages are the general phases of a process, and then steps are the specific things that need to happen in order to move something along in the process. So that's how you can document your processes. And then we will move on to the identify opportunities of this video. Now that you know the strategy and you know how to lay out your process logically, let's talk about identifying opportunities for automation. Okay, so this is important because leaving a business function outlined like above, like we went over, does nothing for us unless we have specifically highlighted the opportunities for automation. This will help us focus on what we could automate. The next section, prioritization, will focus on what we should automate. Okay, so let's just outline the different automation opportunities here. And the way that we can do that is just take out the process and then we can look at where the actors involve Zoho. So again, the actors being just anything that interacts with or within the business. This can be a human or a software program. So obviously we're not going to be able to automate a prospect visiting the website. We can encourage people to do so. We can run ads, but that's not really the idea. The idea here is to say, okay, Zoho is involved in this part of the process, Attributor.io, that's a software program that we can automate. So let's highlight that, Zoho Forms and Zoho CRM. So you can see everywhere that software is involved in the process has been highlighted. That's the first step. This can happen very quickly. Here's some things to consider while doing it. So you don't have to highlight everything, but I'm highlighting everything that can be done automatically because that's where the actors are software programs. Okay. Not everything should be automated. So make sure you have best practices in place before you cement them into your organization via automation. So this is a big principle to get across. The last thing you want to do with automation is have a bad practice cemented into your organization. Now, you're never going to, the caveat to that is your best practice. Best practice makes things sound like they work in binaries, right? It's either a best practice or it's a bad practice. That's not how things work in the real world. When you have a process, it exists on a gradient scale, a sliding scale for how good it is or how bad it is. It's not going to be either bad or good. It's going to exist on a spectrum for how good it is. So best practices can inspire you to make them better and better. But the reason I bring that up is don't feel like you have to make it perfect. You're never going to have a perfect process. So get a minimum viable process, one that can support 80% of your revenue by documenting 20% of it. Make sure it's logical, and then just build a case. We're going to go over that more in a minute. But because these things aren't binary, it's not yes or no. A lot of these things are build your best case as to why this is the best process. What's the logical reasoning that you have behind it? What's the data that supports it? Whatever it might be. Just lay out your argument. This is the process. This is why we're doing the process. Okay? That's what I want you to understand. Not everything should be automated. So make sure you have a best practice or your best possible practices that you can think of in place before you cement them into your organization via automation. This brings us to arguably the most important part of really this video and automation at large, which is prioritization. If you get this wrong, you are going to get burnout from creating automations. You're not going to want to do it. You're not going to want to build systems. You got to make sure you have this component down. It's got to be locked in. So why is this important? Just because you could automate something doesn't mean you should. Prioritization is arguably the most important aspect of automation because building the wrong automation is like spending days climbing the top of the mountain only to realize that you should have climbed a different one. Avoid wasted time and effort with prioritization. So you can see here, this has been grayed out. These are all possible automations. And now you can see green and yellow. The green ones should be automated and the yellow ones could be automated, but they're not a priority right now. So now we need to take all these things into consideration for how we're going to prioritize things. Now, what I was saying earlier is I don't want you to think right or wrong. I want you to think best case wins. So let's take Zoho Forms, for example. So we can go without Sales IQ capturing visitor information, PageSense capturing visitor interaction data, and Attributor.io getting UTM data. This is important, but it's far less important than if someone can actually submit a form that goes into Zoho CRM as a lead. If we don't have this, we can't support any revenue coming into the organization. So this is critical. Another thing, Zoho CRM will get data enrichment from Apollo and update the lead record with enriched data. If this isn't completed, no leads can enter the system, affecting revenue flow into the business. This will have more of an impact. Therefore, it needs to be implemented. Let's add that. Cool. So Zoho CRM will get data enrichment information from Apollo and update the lead record with enriched data. Now, this is arguably more important than these three because this data that we'll get from Apollo.io, which we're actually going to do together at the last part of this video, will help us understand more information about the lead. And Attributor.io giving you UTM data is more important for the marketing aspect of the business, but sales is what's actually going to close deals and get revenue into the organization. So this is more important. Initially, it's more urgent, I would say. So here's some ways you can build your case when you think about these things. And really, I'll just tell you this. It's about having a case. You don't need a perfect case, but as long as you have a strong case behind you, whether you're a solopreneur or you're in an organization of thousands of people, you just want to have a strong case for why you're doing these things. If you have a strong case, that's the best you can do. Don't feel like you have to build a perfect case or you'll never, at some point you have to abandon the case and say, this is as strong as I can make it in the time that I have allotted. I got to move forward. That's what strategy is about. So many people don't want to say one thing is above another, right? A lot of people don't want to say, well, technically this is better because of this and this and this. Just make your case, okay? Don't try to say these are all equal. They're not equal. These aren't equal opportunities. So you've got to logically reason with yourself on what's going to be more important with the information that you have. And you may not have all the information that you need. And so you may need to go to other key stakeholders in the organization and say, hey, am I thinking about this appropriately? This is the case that I have, the direction I'm wanting to head. These are the reasons that I have behind it. What do you think? And then I just put here's my reasoning. Note, If this isn't completed, this should actually be for the Zoho Forms one, but you get the idea. This isn't completed, no leads can enter the system, affecting revenue flow into the business. Okay, that's my reasoning behind it. So ways you can build your case: urgency. If something is urgent, right? This is urgent. Zoho Forms will push the submission data into Zoho CRM as a lead. That needs to happen. The reason that that's urgent is because, again, if it's not completed, no leads can enter the system. So my default is upstream, downstream, or downstream, upstream. It's this principle. And it goes hand in hand with another thing that I call the preferable problem principle. Anyone else uses that, know that you heard it here first, because I've never heard it before, because I invented it. And essentially it's this. It's nothing complex. But upstream, downstream is the principle that when you look at a process that's logically laid out from left to right, typically, unless there's something more urgent and pressing, there's a fire that has to be put out, the best thing you can do is start upstream in the process and then work your way down. That's not always the case, but that's mostly the case. Okay. So for example, if you're doing marketing and sales, for all the problems that you solve upstream, the better you make your process upstream, the easier things become downstream. For example, this happens on a macro scale and at a detailed development micro scale. So for my business, everything is downstream from leads. So if my content is bad, the presentation is bad, and what I do there is bad, then my sales are going to be harder because I have to make up for the trust that wasn't earned correctly during these videos. Okay. But that's upstream of the process. Marketing precedes sales. So the more problems I can solve in marketing, the easier things become in sales. And typically when I have a sales call, it's not me doing a dance for a client. It's someone saying, where do I sign so that we can get started? That's more of the attitude because trust was earned prior to that. So another way to think about it is everything in business is downstream from lead generation. If you struggle with lead generation, you don't have a business to build. You don't have anyone you're attracting into the business that you can offer anything to, right? So that's really the principle here is upstream, downstream. Start upstream in the process and work your way from left to right or top to bottom in the form that we're documenting. Okay, so that's the upstream, downstream or downstream, upstream principle, right? For every problem you solve upstream, downstream of the process is going to be fixed, or it's going to be easier to operate those parts of the process. Preferable problem principle. Okay, one last thing here. That's why it's really important to have the leads module set up correctly. If you can prospect and get your leads in the door, it's going to make your pipeline or your deals pipeline so much easier to operate. So that's one other note I wanted to add there. I think it's important to understand. Preferable problem principle. Everything downstream, this is a general principle, but it complements upstream, downstream really well. The preferable problem principle is every problem you have downstream is preferable to one upstream. So if you were going to play would you rather have, and this is upstream, leads coming to the business, or would you rather not be able to automatically generate a proposal? You would much rather have leads coming to the business. Okay, that is the preferable problem is to not have your proposal documentation automated. Okay, and why does any of this matter? Well, in order to develop something in detail and automate your business, it requires so much effort and time. You have no idea. You might think it's simple. And if someone's making it sound simple, they have no idea what they're doing. These things require a lot of details in order to do right. And you need someone to guide you through that process. And you have to decide where you're going to allocate your precious energy and money and time because you don't have infinite. Okay, you don't have an infinite amount of resources. You have a very finite amount of resources. So now the game is where do you correctly apply all of your time, effort, and money? Because you can't automate everything all at once. You can't automate everything over time, but Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither is a fully automated integrated system. So the preferable problem principle, upstream, downstream, urgency, these things help guide you to correctly apply your energy and your time in Zoho, because Zoho can very quickly cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and give you nothing in return because you weren't being strategic with your resources, your time, and your money. You were just spending it willy-nilly, thinking you could do everything all at once. It's a horrible strategy. It's the best way to break a system and to waste all of your resources. So that's why we're going over these things. That's why these things are so important. Okay, so upstream, downstream, preferable problem principle. Here's another thing to think about. I'm just equipping you with all these different tactics. Impact, effort, forward. So we're going to look this up, and we're not going to do this in depth. but the principle is really interesting. So the quick and dirty of it is, let's say that we were able to take all of the different automations here, all these different opportunities, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We took all of these and we made them into sticky notes or some kind of card. One tactic you can use for prioritization is you can put them on an effort impact board, and you can say, okay, for the Zoho Forms automation, let's say it was a card here, on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of impact, where does it lie on the scale? We could say, well, my case is that it's actually an 8. And the reason it's an 8 is because if someone can't come in the organization, then we can't make any money. And if we can't get a lead to enter the CRM automatically, we can't sell. Okay, that's good. Now, from left to right, you do this for everything, but this is just giving you an idea quickly. From left to right, you would say, okay, with the lead form integration, Zoho Forms integration piece that we're focused on, how much effort is it going to take? And we say it's a 2. It's only going to take a 2 amount of effort because we can go in there very quickly and then we can go in the integration section and fix it. Okay, so if something is an 8 on the y-axis and it's a 2 on the x-axis, it's going to be a quick and easy win, right? This is something super impactful that doesn't take a lot of time. And then anything to the right of that, major projects, is going to be a long-term project that's important. These are fill-in, you can call this backlog, and these are things you just don't do. Okay, so it just gives you a framework to work within where you can logically lay out what needs to be done now, what can be done later, what's important, what's not important. Okay, again, this is about resource allocation. If you're going to be a strategic thinker and you're going to build systems, you have to learn to think like this. Because if you don't, you're going to waste a ton of time and money and you're going to say, Zoho didn't work for us. Zoho isn't what makes it work. You make Zoho work. It's people who build systems. These systems automatically don't do anything of themselves. You make them do things automatically. You teach the system how to treat your business, and you teach the system how to, you build the automations in your system that support your business. You really do. And no one, at any point, this skill is going to be extremely useful. So that's why I'm trying to equip you with all these different tactics. Impact effort board is my favorite. It's the one I use the least. I just think it's a fun one. Downstream, upstream is my default, right? So I just say, okay, let's start upstream the process and work our way down. And as fires come up, we'll prioritize the fires, right? The urgency things. Rolling wave. This is just a principle to think of. You don't have to in detail document everything and then do this on a macro scale. You don't have to detail every single step of the marketing and sales and customer service journey. What you can do is you can do your high level development, just to give you a visual here. Let's say the journey map. You can start with these large blocks of phases, right? These stages, and then you can do a rolling wave. So the wave is like this and it's going to the right, right? So the wave is rolling down. And as the wave hits this one, you start upstream, go downstream, then you can detail all of this out. Then once you've automated this part of the process, the wave hits lead, and then you can detail this part of the process. And then the wave hits MQL, and you can detail this part of the process. So instead of detailing everything first before you even start with automation, the principle of rolling wave is that as the wave hits certain stages, then you build out the steps. Then you hit the next stage, and then you build out the steps. Then you hit the next stage and build out the steps. Or as you're doing rolling wave, you might find that there is a process downstream right here that needs some immediate attention, and then you can push the wave. You can skip it over here. You can solve this. You can detail it out, automate it, check, and then come back. Okay, so that's just to give you an idea of what you can do there for rolling wave. So those are things to consider as you prioritize. Again, the idea is now that you have highlighted these different opportunities for automation, now you're saying this is more important than another thing. And if you're going to do that, your brain's going to resist because we don't like to do that, but you have to be able to build a case for why something should be number one, number two. And here's the thing, there's no right or wrong. People are going to have different analysis. People are going to have different things for their prioritization. Customer service might say something different than sales and marketing, but you are the one doing this. You're the one watching this. So you've got to come up with your reasons for why you should build it. And maybe you're a solopreneur. And if you are, it's best case scenario because you get so much software for very little cost with Zoho One. And you're going to be able to automate your business with this strategy. So that is the prioritization section of automation. The next thing to think about is design. And by design, I mean designing solutions. Now, the reason it's important to design solutions is just because you have opportunities doesn't mean you have a plan. So you've got to design a plan or a course of action to actually implement a solution. At the very least, you need to come up with some ideas. So solution design is about solving problems on paper before we jump into the trenches. You save time and energy by designing the automation before you build it. It may seem like overkill, but it's necessary when automating the entire business process, right? So imagine this like someone handing a bucket to another person, to another person, to another person before they throw it on the fire. Okay, you need to do things in a logical sequence here. The first bucket, the first creation of the automation is the design, right? What you do on paper. Then when you jump in the trenches, you can focus on the right things and you don't get distracted. Okay, so the way you actually accomplish this inside of Zoho is this, or inside of the process, how you actually go about this is you document things like this. So solution, Drew will integrate Zoho Forms with Zoho CRM. So you can see here, I've taken these two, right? These two green opportunities, and I've just broken them up. Here's opportunity number 1. Here's opportunity number 2, right? So these are the first two we're going to focus on. And you can see this part is really easy, right? Just identifying the opportunities and then prioritizing them. Prioritization is even harder, but it's still easy in comparison to designing the solution. This takes a lot of energy and time. And this doesn't even take a fraction of the energy and time that it takes to actually go and do it, which we're going to do at the end of this video. So what I'm trying to help you see is compound growth in terms of complexity, energy, and resources going from the paper to in the trenches. So it's the preferable problem principle again. The better you can do with mapping out your processes, identifying the opportunities and prioritizing those opportunities, the better the design and development is going to be. If you prioritize wrong and then you go into designing a solution, you're going to think to yourself, I'm solving the wrong problem. And so you're never going to finish it because you're going to be like, there's a more pressing problem. Well, that's the prioritization section that should have happened before. So as you do these things repeatedly, you're going to start to see the importance of doing this. When you just do a one-off automation, you're going to think, that was overkill. That whole video where Drew mapped out everything. I'm not talking to those of you who are making one automation. I'm talking to those of you who are trying to automate your entire business, or at the very least, automate a process. Okay, so that's the importance there. So Zoho Forms, you got to take your prioritized opportunities. We're just going to start with 2 for the sake of this video and the amount of time that we have allotted in this video to go over things. And we're going to develop a solution. So here's the objective, or here's the opportunity. Zoho Forms will push the submission data to Zoho CRM as a lead. Well, this one is pretty easy. If we were to look at the effort impact, this is an easy win. So we can just go right into an action plan. Okay, we can say Drew will integrate Zoho Forms with Zoho CRM. Access Zoho Forms, go to integration section, integrate the Zoho form with Zoho CRM, configure field mapping, note, add a value manually for the field, lead status equals MQL sales ready. Awesome. That's all we need. This one's a quick and easy win. And if we look at the effort impact, quick and easy win. So we don't need to do a lot of detail for the solution. Here's some things to consider. Solution design is time intensive and the execution is labor intensive. And the labor intensity is like 10x the time intensity of designing a solution. And if you design a solution poorly, the execution is going to go extremely poorly. And you're going to spend tons of time. Those are the situations where you ask someone to do something, they do it wrong, you get back with them, they do it wrong. And really the problem is, it could be them, but it's most likely you, and that you're not detailing things out. And people are like, well, I don't like to get in the weeds. Okay, I'm a details person, and details matter. If you don't have details, you don't have clarity. If you don't have clarity, you can't execute. Clarity precedes execution. The way you get clarity is with details. Okay, so you need to be a detail-oriented person if you want a system to be built correctly. That's one thing to consider and keep in mind. Okay, the other thing here is simple. It's a game of strategy. We talked about that. Finite resources, infinite options. That's strategy really is prioritization for all intents and purposes. Simple automation can come with an action plan out of the gate. Here's a simple automation, right? Simple solution. More advanced automation should start with requirements, as it's difficult to anticipate each action that will be required initially. Okay, so when you have more sophisticated labor, or gosh, I can't even believe I said that. When you have more sophisticated people that are solving problems, you can give them less requirements because they can read between the lines. But I wouldn't assume that, okay? So for example, let's bring this down to the details of this specific automation. Zoho CRM will get data enrichment information from Apollo.io and update the lead record with enriched data. Solution: Drew will add a Zoho Flow automation that will fetch data from Apollo to enrich new deals. Okay, just stating what you're doing is half the battle. Now we come to requirements. So I don't know every single step right now in the design phase that's going to be required to build that automation for Apollo. Okay, there's a new API I have to learn. I have to go through that API and figure things out. So this is what I would say if we were looking at the effort impact board would be more of a long-term thing, right? A major project, or it seems like it'd be more of a major project. So what I need to do is outline requirements, okay? And I need to take what could be subjective for success and make it objective. That's one of the major problems with things that are technical. You'll see that NASA have extensive requirements, meta requirements for their requirements. Or in other words, you can go look, this is publicly accessible. NASA has all of these documents on how to properly document requirements for something technical. Because the thing is, it's very difficult to take something like Zoho or building automations and make it objective. Okay, it's very easy for it to be subjective, and that's where people get frustrated, is a client will come into a technical person and say, these are all the things that I want, okay? And they'll be throwing out their resources and their strategy willy-nilly. It's not very coherent, it's not very focused. And then the developer doesn't have the details necessary for clarity, therefore their execution is terrible. And the execution is so out of line with the initial vision presented by the client for everything they wanted to do with Zoho. And that's where you get a mismatch and you get a ton of frustration. And then the client realizes, oh my gosh, I have to hold this person's hand. I don't have the time or energy to do so. We already had this conversation. And then that's where consulting engagements go to fail. So the remedy for that is when something is simple, you have an action plan, a detailed action plan. When you have something more complex, you just do the requirements. And the requirements are helpful because this is where it comes very objective. It either did or didn't happen. Okay, so Drew will add a Zoho Flow automation that will fetch data from Apollo to enrich new leads. Zoho must trigger the automation to fetch Apollo enrichment data on lead creation. Okay, so that's the first thing. That either did or didn't happen. Zoho must fetch the company name, LinkedIn URL, title, and location information. Okay, and then we could put as another one, Zoho must update the created lead from the initial trigger. Zoho must update the created lead with the company name, LinkedIn URL, and location information. Okay. So there you go. Here are the different requirements. And so this makes it very objective, right? Zoho must trigger the automation to fetch Apollo enrichment data. Zoho must fetch the company name. Zoho must update the created lead. Again, the reason I can't go in detail and do a simple action plan is because I could have 50, 60 steps here for this specific solution. And so you need to determine what's the best way to frame things or to phrase things or to document things for the time that you have allotted to support, right? Because basically you're packaging this up. So in the future, when it comes to in the trenches execution, you have a guiding document to help you structure what you're doing and to keep you focused. So the better you get at this, execution is going to become much easier. And the reason why I wanted to go through all this homework is so you could see in this next part how much easier, how much more logical, how much more impactful it becomes to execute once we've done all this homework. Okay, so I don't know the exact phrase, but it's like for every hour of planning, you save like 4 hours of execution, something like that. That is certainly true for Zoho development. For all the planning that you do, no matter how painful it is, and it is painful, it's very painful to take what is comfortable for us, which is vague, talking very vaguely about things. I want to fully integrate an automated system. That is about as vague as it gets. Bringing that down to earth, bringing that down from the clouds and saying, in detail, what are we actually going to do? That's painful. We get uncomfortable. We're like, well, now I have to commit to something. Now something's more tangible. That makes us uncomfortable. You have to learn to push through that and say, no, we are going to get detailed. We are going to prioritize these things. We are going to be smart about this, because anyone can talk vaguely about anything. Anyone can say, I want to start a business. I want to automate my business. Anyone can do that. Not many people can build out a strategy, logically execute it, and then focus on what's most impactful. Okay? You're not going to be able to do it perfectly, but you do it on a gradient. It's how well you can build these systems. It's how well you can document these things. Okay? So that's why there's no guarantees. It's not a binary. It always exists on a gradient. And that is how you can design solutions when you are developing automations in Zoho. If you have gotten to this section, congratulations. We have done a lot of what might seem like difficult and mundane work, paperwork, to get to the real work. I promise you it was all worth it getting to this point. But now I'm going to show you how we build off the back of this documentation and preparation and get into the execution, and how much easier things are now going to be because we did our homework. Okay, so we talked about the Zoho forms will push the submission data. We took it all the way through. Just to quickly recap, we took it all the way from the 30,000 foot view strategy over to the analysis of a detailed business function. We highlighted opportunities for that business function. Then we prioritized it so that we're focusing on what's most impactful. And now we are actually going to execute based on the action plan, the solution, the design solution. Now we can actually get into the weeds and we can actually execute this or implement it into the business. So congratulations if you've gotten this far. Okay, so Zoho Forms will push the submission data to Zoho CRM as a lead. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to make sure that the Zoho form is integrated with the Zoho CRM in the leads module. I'm going to go to forms.zoho.com. The best practice, by the way, if you're using Zoho One, is actually go to Zoho One first, because some of you might accidentally trigger another instance of Zoho Forms. So ignore that back practice real quickly of what I just did. Just go to one.zoho.com and then navigate over to Forms if you're on Zoho One. Okay, so I have got a couple of forms. We're going to worry about this registration of interest form. Okay, so again, from this document, now it's very clear what I need to do. The end goal is Zoho Forms will push submission data into Zoho CRM. In order to do that, Drew integrate Zoho Forms with Zoho CRM. Access Zoho Forms, go to the integration section. Here's the integration section, and I can integrate this. I can select the leads module. See here, integrate Zoho Form with Zoho CRM, configure field mapping. Okay, so now I've got the field mapping right here. I can go through this, and hopefully this makes sense. The more expertise you have in an application, the better the planning and the execution goes. Because if I didn't know anything about Zoho Forms, I wouldn't be able to give this level of detail and say configure field mapping out of field value manually to the field lead status. I wouldn't know that you could go in here and that you could say, for let's say status, that you could go in and you could add a manual field. I wouldn't know those things. I wouldn't be able to do those things unless I knew it, right? So add input manually. I wouldn't know I could do things like this unless I knew the software. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so this is where I would conduct the field mapping. I'm not going to go through all of this, but basically I just need to choose from the builder which of these answers are going to go to what section of the leads module in Zoho CRM. So that's where I can then integrate, find the leads module, and set this all up. So I actually have this running through for various reasons. I'm just not going to go into this video. I have this running through Zoho Flow, but I wanted to give you an example of how you'd actually execute this. So again, this is the most impactful thing because it's super impactful for the business, and it's very easy to do. This didn't take me very much time, but that's because I did my homework and I identified what the best opportunity was going to be to begin with. Okay, I was being strategic about it. Then I would go ahead and integrate once my field mapping was complete. Then check. I've done all of this, right? So I can check that off. I created this automation. Now we're going to move on to Zoho CRM will get data enrichment information from Apollo.io and update the lead record with enriched data. Okay, so for the Apollo integration, there's a lot of things that need to happen, but because I have documented the requirements here, it's going to be so much easier to execute. So once you jump into Zoho, the nice thing about this is Apollo.io, that's a third-party software, gives you API documentation. So it says, hey, if you want to talk with us, right? If you want to enrich data, this does data enrichment. Maybe think to yourself, well, Drew, doesn't Zoho CRM have enrichment capabilities? Or in other words, it adds data to a lead based on a few different data points. Yes, it does, but it's not nearly as robust as Apollo. So Apollo is a very popular people enrichment platform that will give you more data. So in other words, you can just put in like, hey, Tim Zhang, and then you can get Tim Zhang, this is the LinkedIn URL, this is his title, this is the photo URL, email, organization ID, employment history. Where are you going to get that? That comes from LinkedIn, by the way. So it gives you so much information. It gives you all their tech stack, different investors. Like it's just crazy the amount of data that it can give you, right? So this is like true data enrichment in comparison to what Zoho can do. So if you want something more robust, you would go with Apollo, okay? And you might choose to do that because strategically it's better for you to have more information up front. So you want to do something like data enrichment because I'm demonstrating this to you. It's giving you ideas that you can use in your business. Okay, so with that, we have a couple of requirements. Zoho must trigger the automation to fetch Apollo enrichment data on lead creation. Okay, how do we meet that requirement? Well, you can see here inside of the flow, new lead will trigger this function inside of Zoho Flow. And if we go into the function, we can see the script. Okay, so here, Zoho must fetch the company name, LinkedIn URL, title, and location information. So you can see here that we're grabbing all of that data, okay? I know it's scary to look at code, but we're gonna break it down and make this really easy. So we're grabbing information from Apollo in this script. This data, this is called JSON. I think it's called like a JavaScript object notation, but it's essentially how you format data so that you can grab it inside of code. So this is Deluge code. This is what you use to do more advanced automations. Gives you the greatest amount of flexibility when doing automations using these scripts. Gives you, if you know how to do Deluge, you can make a lot of money because it's very much it's in demand. It's hard to do. Okay, but if you're a developer, it's not going to be that hard for you. Okay, so you can see response. The response is what you get from an API. This would be the response. That's why you're seeing response here. From the response, we can get certain bits of information that are buried or nested within this, what we call payload. It's just a bunch of information. Key value gives us a bunch of key values. For example, we look at get person, get title. We can see here, we get person. We can look down and see title, and then we can get this information and then bring it into the CRM. So that's what's helpful. And then we can organize this data into a map, and then we can actually finally update the lead, okay, in the map. And so Zoho must update the created lead. That is accomplished right here, where you can see zoho.crm update record lead. Okay, but you can see this takes hours to do, right? Like this script isn't even long. This is actually, as far as if we were to even consider, this would be a quick win, actually. I'd consider this a quick win based on my team, what we're able to do with development. But some people might say, oh, that would take me hours and hours and hours to do. So for you on the effort impact, if you think of it in the board I showed you earlier, it might be a long-term project for you. Whereas for me, I'm like, this is a quick and easy win. Let's just get this knocked out. But the idea that I wanted to get across is this is obviously more advanced than what we did with the Zoho Form integration. This is much more complicated. And so you can go down the rabbit hole with this. You can grab all the information that's available in Apollo and make this a huge long-term project where you're getting all the employment history, because that's not easy to structure inside of Deluge. You can see how much time can be consumed in different tasks. So it's so important. I can't even stress this enough. I really can't stress this enough. I know I'm like beating a dead horse, but I just can't stress how important it is to do all the steps prior to this, or you're going to end up with a messy system that makes no sense and the automations are incorrectly applied in the grand scheme of things, right? So all you want is you want to have a very strong case for why you are going with these different opportunities. And then you want to outline the requirements if it's a little more difficult, because could you imagine if I tried to do what I did here? Let's take this off. This is really ugly. Zoho Forms will push the submission data. Could you imagine if I tried to do every single step here, the exact action plan for this script, and I was to say every little step that needed to occur here? That would take forever. That would take absolutely forever. So of course I'm not going to do that, right? But that's the idea that I'm trying to get across with you, is when you do something that's more simple and you know the action plan, list the action plan. If you don't know the action plan, then list the requirements, what must happen. And then if you want to get really down the rabbit hole on how to form requirements, go on to NASA's requirements page and they'll show you exactly how they document the requirements, okay? Technical requirements have been done before. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. And don't reinvent the wheel. Use something that's already been done, a sophisticated way of framing these things, okay? All right, so some things to consider. Once you have every solution here, I would highly recommend that you add it to Zoho Projects, okay, so that you can organize your work management. Zoho Projects is a great solution. If you guys want me to make a video on Zoho Projects, I'd actually really love to do that. I use Zoho Projects in my business. And guess what? Other Zoho partners don't even use Zoho projects in their day-to-day operations, which is so strange because they're consulting people to use an app that they don't have. I could name very specific people. I'm not going to do that, or specific organizations that do that, but it's so weird. You know, they'll like build a creator app to do what Zoho Projects has. And I'm like, you don't think thousands of developers in Chennai and Austin are not able to do something you can do in a creator app? It doesn't even make sense. It's not very strategic, and it's a huge waste of time to do what's already out of the box with Zoho. So anyways, things to consider. Each solution as a task in Zoho Projects will help you keep track of your efforts and organize your strategy very logically. You don't want to do it in a document like I'm doing now. You want to do this homework in a document and then actually link the document to a Zoho project task. That's the best practice. Other than that, I'm going to leave you with one thing here. So when you are designing solutions and you're executing solutions, don't immediately jump to code, okay? So it's very labor intensive. It's going to take a lot of time. So what I'd suggest is initially what you would do is you'd go into Apollo and you'd look out of the box. Is there any out of the box solution here where I can go into apollo.io, for example, and you can see I can fetch an existing contact in Apollo, but I can't hit this API, people enrichment in Apollo. I'm not able to do that. So therefore, you start with what's out of the box, and then you go to custom development later. And I mean, if you're a Zoho partner watching, you especially want to do this for your clients because you don't want to, I mean, it's in your selfish best interest to do this, but you really shouldn't do it because if you get caught, you're going to lose a client. And so it's just not worth it. It's not ethical. But you want to make sure with your clients, you're using your time, especially if you're billing by the hour, in the best way possible. And so the best way for you to do that is to, best way for you to earn their trust and use their time the best way possible is to start with this framework. This is the simple one. There's a more complicated way to do this, but for the sake of this video, we're just going to do this. Number one, is there an out-of-box solution inside of Zoho? The way you would know that is if you're an actual expert in Zoho and you know all the options that are allotted to you within each application out of the box. We'll call that OOB, out of the box solution. Is there an out of the box solution? Then you should say, okay, no, there's not. There's nothing out of the box that can accomplish this based on my client's requirements, my requirements. There's nothing that can be done here. And then your next step would be, okay, do we have the ability to do this with a custom function, right? Can we go into Zoho Flow and actually get the trigger going inside of Zoho? But then here, use a custom function. That's what this stands for, the FX, custom function. Can we do it via custom function? Is there a way for us to interact with the application in a custom function? Okay, so that framework that alone will save you tons of time and money, being able to do that. But that is the masterclass on automation. I hope you found this helpful. If you want more training that's free, you can go to my YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Also, make sure to check out Z Training. It's free. It's on my website. And it goes over this master strategy that we talked about. Go get Z Training. Go look at the master strategy. Get really familiar with this if you are a leader, administrator, or most importantly, if you're in charge of a Zoho implementation, make sure you know that strategy like the back of your hand. You can access it for free. It's going to be free forever. And with that, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.